weekend, and I'm hoping that Sunday is going well for you as it is the beginning of this week. I pray that God is with us throughout this week and that it's a blessing and is safe. So, as mentioned before, the topic of today is called Sticks and Stones. And at the end of it, there'll be time for questions or contributions. So, if you think of anything, please remember it and bring it to the end. So where I got the title from is from a folk phrase from 1894, and it says, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And the reason that it was created was to help people to be more self-aware and to not allow words to hurt them, whether someone is insulting them, making fun of them, or whatever the case may be. However, this phrase is incorrect because words do have the ability to hurt. They have the ability to cause trauma and pain that can last way longer and have lasting effects than if you were to break your arm or your leg. And there are 4 forms of verbal communication, but because of time and for the topic today, we're only going to focus on number 2 and number 3. So number 2 is passive aggressive, and someone that speaks in passive aggressive form uses sarcasm, makes facial expressions that contradict their words. They spread rumors and give the silent treatment. They disregard others' feelings, deny that they're upset. And people that speak aggressively, they act hostile when confronted, make uncomfortable eye contact, disregard others' personal space, crosses their arms or rolls their eyes, insists their way is the right way. Now, in our culture, these 2 things are especially important and is what is affecting us and the way that we communicate, as well as the way that we tend to use body language and other facial expressions that in the ways that we communicate, not realizing that it can all be harmful and keep us from the path of heaven. So the key text for tonight comes from Proverbs 13:3, and it says, "He who guards his mouth preserves his life, but he who opens wide his lips shall have destruction." So as stated, the whole point of this teaching or this program for tonight is to discuss how the way that we communicate can keep us from entering heaven, and specifically with our Ghanaian community and our Ghanaian cultures and how it has affected us. So in this presentation, I want to express how growing up in an African household is not for the weak, meaning that depending on where you are, whether you were born in Ghana, whether you're born here, there's a lot of situations that can help disrupt the way that you communicate and the way that you grow up. And depending on your experiences at home, it can affect the way that you learn to communicate, the way that you continue to communicate. So we'll start with unnecessary comments, things that you do not need to say.
There are 5 ways trauma shows up in our Ghanaian community. Number 1, emotionally dysregulation. There are a lot of people who are emotionally dysregulated here on social media and in real life, but they do not know it. They don't have the awareness that they are emotionally dysregulated. Number 2, low self-esteem. Oh, a lot of us suffer from that. Low self-esteem. You see how people project their insecurities on other people, how people come into other people's comment section and talk about other people's bodies. They are projecting their own insecurities and their own inferiority on others. Number 3, the lack of acknowledgement of mental health in our Ghanaian communities. That is a trauma response, or that is a manifestation of trauma, because trauma has become normalized in our community, that it becomes the everyday life that, oh, it is okay. But meanwhile, we as Ghanaians, we need mental health support. We need to invest in mental health research, in behavioral science research, but we don't do that. So as a result, everybody's walking around triggered, wired, all of that. Number 4, spiritual bypassing. We use spirituality to avoid everything. Forgive and forget. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. We use all of these things to avoid dealing with our emotions. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Instead of teaching children how to behave, how to regulate their emotions, parents will rather use the rod to tame the children and to avoid doing the hard work of parenting. 5, the lack of boundaries in our community. Even here on social media, people ask intrusive questions, questions they do not know what are personal questions and what are intrusive questions. People do not know you from anywhere. They will ask you, are you married? Do you have kids? All of those things. Somebody also could meet you for the first time and they could tell you, I love you. I want to marry you. What is that? It is the lack of boundaries that we have, and that is a trauma response, and we need to acknowledge it.
So, as our sister was saying, there are 5 traumas that are plaguing our Ghanaian communities. But for the sake of time and in this presentation, we're only going to focus on 3. The first one is trauma has become normalized. Second, lack of boundaries and low self-esteem. And the third is the Bible verse, spare the rod, you spoil the child. So the first, trauma has become normalized. Now, this question, because we're on Zoom, so we can't see each other, this question is for everyone, no matter your age, whether you're 60, your 40s, 20s, whatever your age. If you can think of a time that your parents have ever apologized to you after they did something wrong to you, or if you feel like they did something wrong to you. Usually when I ask that question, almost no hands are raised because we've grown to become normalized that our parents or people that are older than us or people that are considered elders to us, they don't apologize. If they do something wrong, if they make a mistake, to them, there's no need to apologize. You just move on. It happens. Maybe they react and you move on. And that is a huge issue, especially in our communities, because the importance of apologizing for your mistake is taking accountability and acknowledging your wrongdoing. And by not apologizing to your children, to your spouse, to whoever, you're creating an environment where you make it normal for them to accept treatment from other people when they leave outside. And then sometimes when we do recognize that we've done something wrong, take our mothers, for example, instead of actually apologizing, they'll make some food and they'll say, hey, the jollof is ready, come get some. Or, hey, I made this, I want to go buy you this. And that is the form that they make the apology. Now, I'm not saying that anything is wrong by cooking to apologize or trying to give gift or show love, but the actual words and acknowledging your wrongdoing is important in healing in the way that we communicate with each other. But in that same breath, there'll be people that say, oh, but still, because of my age, because I'm an elder, because I'm a pastor, because I'm a deacon, because of whatever my placement is, I don't need to apologize. I haven't done anything wrong for me to apologize to someone younger or my partner for. And we want to always take the way that we communicate and talk back to the Bible. So Proverbs 8:13 says, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogance and the evil way, and the perverse mouth I hate. Now you might be asking me, well, why did I bring this Bible verse up? And it specifically has to do with pride. We think that it is because of respect that sometimes we don't apologize. We think because of where our age is or who we are to somebody is why we don't apologize. And believe it or not, all that comes from pride. And you also may disagree with me. No, I'm not prideful. It's not because I think highly of myself and that's why I don't apologize. But if we really look at the definition of pride, and it says the quality or state of being proud, such as pleasure that comes from some relationship, association, achievement, or possession that is seen as a source of honor, respect, or etc. Meaning that the sense of pride comes from our station. So sometimes there's people that, oh, because I'm a pastor, I have no one can regulate me, or I have the right to say certain things. Because I'm an elder, because I've been appointed in this position and God has chosen me, I have the right to say certain things. Because I'm your parent and I know best, I have the right to say certain things. And that is not true. God himself says that that is not true, that it shouldn't be pride that is running you. Taking accountability for the things that you do. It is important when we take accountability to God and we ask God for forgiveness for our wrongdoing. And it's the same that we should be acting with each other. So we shouldn't be thinking just because I'm this age, just because me a penny moon, or just because you're younger than me, that I shouldn't be apologizing to you. No matter your age, no matter the scenario, no matter the circumstances, it's important that we take accountability and apologize for our wrongdoings when interacting with each other. Excuse me.
Yeah, Ubia Samba, Mama Yensusunka, but I say, we need a panaya drill, so one in ya drill, and to say, Yesusu, Eka. Mammy, we are somewhere okay. The cracker and the same. The cracker, and the same. So sister, no Wawari Spanish knew, so Wawari Cambodia knew, so Wawari Afghanistan knew, so then the cracker and the same. Wedding or yeah, a wedding a woman the crack, anything. Sometimes we say unnecessary things without any meaning. Mu bi mwenyi, esa mu tuye nkola na fo, but mu nneoma bi a moye wo online no, enhyen kran entufo. Na nkɔkɔ yɛ wedding, ne wayɛ wedding kakra, anaa ɔnyɛ ne den, nyɛ ne sika bɛso, ɛna ɔyɛɛyɛ no. Nyɛ ne sika bɛso, ɛna ɔyɛɛyɛ no. Nti na da bia meka sɛ ɛyɛ a moma yɛ nsusu fa yɛ asɛm mbra social media, because ɛna obi bɛka asɛm, na wobɛka sɛ ɔno ne fie, asɛm biara ne ne fie. Ɔno ne fie wadwo, nso wo sɛ kɔhwɛ deɛ ɔte ho ɛwɔ ne fie, wagya ɛbɛka obi deɛ. Ɛka ne yayaaya, obi tumi ka asɛm wɔ social media, wote a wode wo ti ɛbɛbɔ dan mu. Ɔka ama n'ahyew, waware Spanish ni, waware Cambodia ni, wedding no ɔyɛɛyɛ no, sɛ yɛ wedding papa o, sɛ nyɛ wedding papa o, ɔno nea ɔpɛ ɛna wayɛ. Nti wowɔ no, ne krakra ɛne sɛn.
The second trauma that is plaguing, oh, sorry, 1 second. My volume is low. Okay, let me try again. Oh, still. Sorry, I hope you can. Okay, this is a little better. All right. Sorry, 1 second. So the second trauma that was mentioned is lack of boundaries. And in our community, especially, it seems that there are certain things that we talk about and we don't have the right to speak on it, or we just open our mouths to certain things because we feel like it is our right to do so. It seems that the minute I turned 29, an alarm or a text message was sent to all my aunties and my uncles and whoever that thinks that I'm of age. Duckus, when are you getting married? Duckus, when are you getting married? And that is one of the questions, or that can be considered something that includes lack of boundaries, because especially in this day and age, we don't tend to think about the triggers or what it can cause when we say certain things like that. For example, there's sometimes when it comes to the question of when you're getting married, there's some people in our community that have no intentions of getting married. I know it's a small group of them and it's not regular, but there are people that have no intentions to get married. It is not in their future, it is not in their plans. The idea of marriage does not appeal to them. Then there's people that are having trouble getting married, finding suitors or finding people that would be interested in them. I think Yarif, you said, like, especially with young girls from a young age all the way until college, we're telling them to face your books, pay attention to your education, don't go outside, stay at home, learn how to cook, learn how to clean, but everything that you do, you stay home and you're family oriented. And then after a certain point, while we keep beating this into them, telling them, focus on your books, then the next breath it comes, where's your husband? And we don't realize that we're not giving people a chance to be able to enter into that part of their life on their own. It's as if one end we're pressuring on this side and the next end we're pressuring on another. Sometimes it's hard for people to even find a suitor because of this reason. Sometimes they don't go outside, so they haven't been introduced to people. Sometimes the people that are around them aren't people that are made for them or that they're interested in. So they may not be married yet because they're having trouble, or maybe there is someone that they're interested in, but because of whatever is going on in the background that you don't know about, that's why the person hasn't entered into marriage yet. So there's a lot of reasons why someone may not be married yet, or someone is waiting that you have no idea about. And as a culture and as a community, sometimes we speak on things that we don't need to speak on. Sometimes we ask questions that we don't need to, because the issue here is the pressure that can come with, when are you getting married? You're of age, you're getting old, you're not getting younger. Whatever the case may be, you don't understand that it can put pressure on someone to end up in a situation that they have no business being in. It can put pressure on someone to go and marry someone that they weren't supposed to be with, be in a relationship with a man or a woman that will cause harm to them. And then when they get divorced, now the same people that were pressuring them to get married are now talking about why are you now divorced? There's certain things that we don't need to discuss when it comes to other people that we don't need to ask. And then you think that after you get married, the questions are finished. But it's not. After you get married, now the questions are, when are you having a kid? When are the babies coming? And that's another question that is something we don't need to ask, that we should let God take control over. Because though, again, when it comes to pregnancy, when it comes to marriages, there's many reasons why someone may not be there yet. And one of the number one things is financial. Kids cost a lot of money. Diapers, formula, medication, all the baby specific things, especially these days, it costs a lot of money. So when you go to ask someone, when are you having kids? You should be thinking to yourself, do I plan to financially help them with this kid? When I ask them, when are you producing children? When are you having more children? You need to ask yourself these questions, because sometimes it is because of the money. Sometimes they can't afford to. And as much as children are a blessing, and as much as parents like to help and babysit, or you might have a community around you, at the end of the day, if the couple themselves are not prepared, then they won't have children because it is expensive. Another reason is that some people don't want children. Again, just like how it's a small group that doesn't plan to get married, there's also a group of people that don't want to have children, especially in the world that we're living in today. There's school shootings, there's crazy people at the mall. You can't go to the movie theaters without dying. You can't go to certain places without feeling like you're in danger. So you can understand if there's some people that don't want to have children at all because of the fear of bringing children into this world can bring. And that one of the most important reasons is sometimes people are having trouble having children. From the outside, you may not know that they're going through IVF. Maybe you may not know that they're tracking their ovulation, and they're trying and they're trying and they're trying, and it's not happening. And because of that, on the outside, they might keep a good face on, and it might seem like everything's okay. But here you are asking them, when are they having children, when they're actively trying to have children. So there's some things that we don't need to say. And the reason is, if you had the right to ask, you would already know. I'm going to say that one more time. If you had the right to ask, you would already know. Some of the things that we go and we open our mouths about, it has nothing to do with us. Sometimes we're saying, yes, some of these things we say is out of concern, and other times it's out of curiosity, but we don't realize some of these interactions, how lasting effect it can be. The month that we're in is October, and it is Pregnancy and Infant Awareness Loss Awareness Month. Basically, there are women out there that will try to get pregnant and they can't. They'll try to get pregnant, it will take, and they'll miscarry. They'll get pregnant, it'll make it out of the womb, and then outside the womb, the baby dies. They'll make the baby out of the womb, the baby might live a couple months, and due to SIDS or whatever the case may be, then the baby dies again. So that especially is another reason why that question is not necessary to ask, because you have no idea what's going on. This baby on the right hand, his name was Legend Saint. And I say his name was Legend Saint. I was there the day that he died, and I witnessed them try to bring him back to life. I witnessed them trying to restart his heart, and to no avail. And going through that and watching him die and viewing everything and taking it in, I didn't realize the PTSD that it caused within me. I didn't realize the trauma of this baby's death that it caused me. That a year later, I was watching a movie, and in the movie scene, this father was running in the hospital with his child because his child was dying. And the scene of that movie reminded me of the day that Legend died, and how his mother was running into the hospital with him in her hands. And I immediately started crying. I was having a panic attack. I couldn't breathe. The world just seemed to be going crazy around me, and I didn't even realize that his death would affect me this hard, that I couldn't even watch a movie. And he wasn't even my child. Now imagine how his mom is feeling. She had another son who's older than him. So when he died, she still had to be strong because she had other children to take care of. So on the outside, you would think that she's just a regular, normal lady just going about her life. But whole time, she just had to bury her son who just turned 1 a few weeks ago. And you would go and ask that lady, when are you having children? When's the next baby coming? This one, your child needs a sibling. There's certain things that we don't need to ask people because we don't know what's going on with them. We don't know what they're experiencing. We don't know what's going on with their lives. So there's certain things we need to be careful when we discuss. Another trauma that was mentioned is low self-esteem. And especially in our culture, that can show up in discussing people's weight gain or their weight loss, weight gain, and appearances. So we're going to learn some phrases. First, we're going to start with body shaming. Body shaming is to mock or stigmatize someone by making critical comments about the shape, size, or appearance of their body. Body dysmorphic disorder, a mental health condition in which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance. And then we have eating disorders. Constant thoughts about eating and intense fear of gaining weight become an obsession for a person who has an eating disorder. Living with an eating disorder is very hard. The road to recovery is not easy, but with treatment, a person can recover and go on to lead a healthy life. Now, you might be asking, well, why am I bringing these up? Why am I talking about the negative things that come about discussing weight? Because again, in our culture, in our Ghanaian SDA culture, it has become a regular thing to discuss each other's weight as if we're talking about the weather. Someone will see and be like, hey, Duckus, it's saying, oh, Duckus, you gained weight. Or, oh, Wayakese. We talk about it as if it's everyday conversation. We talk about it as if we're just saying the sun is nice or we went to the beach this weekend. We don't realize that the effects and the way that we talk about people's appearances can affect them very negatively. That it can get to the point that you can even cause someone into depression about talking about their weight, and depression can lead to suicide. And if you don't believe me, we'll let the numbers do the talking. So one study reports that at age 13, 53% of American girls are unhappy with their bodies. This grows to 78% by the time the girls reach 17. So by 13, that's when you're first entering high school, probably the end of middle school, that 53% of girls are already discussing their bodies. And then it grows to 78% by the time that they're 17. So this is in high school. They didn't even make it outside of college yet. And these numbers may be discussing girls, but it also applies the same thing to men. Men as well get the same treatment as women. It's just not talked about as much. Then 50% of teens are self-conscious about their bodies. 26.2% report being dissatisfied. So again, as a teenager, you haven't even grown, you haven't even gone to college, you're in high school, and one of the biggest things that's on your brain is your weight. 45.5% of teens report considering cosmetic surgery. 43.7% of women over 60 report considering cosmetic surgery. So that means girls that before they even make it to college, they're thinking about getting a BBL, they're thinking about liposuction, they're thinking about getting their nose done, they're thinking about all these ways to alter their bodies to make it more satisfying. And for what? And then you think that, oh, by the time you're older and you've lived your life or you're up there in age, you'll be comfortable. But no, it says even when you get to 60 years of age, there's still women that are considering making changes to their body to please them, to make them feel better. And we have 40 to 60% of elementary school girls, which is ages 4 through 11, are concerned about their weight or about becoming too fat. There's no reason why a 4-year-old should be even considering their weight. There's no reason a 4-year-old should be thinking about that they're getting too fat. And especially in our culture, we will talk to even little girls, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and we'll call them names, we'll call them fat, we'll say they're getting too big. And the way that we will do it will not be appropriate. And it's all because of appearance. Not always is it because of concern. And I've discussed this with my father before, and he said sometimes people bring up other people's weight because they're concerned. They might think that by in health there's something going on with them and they might need medical attention. But the issue is when you're discussing someone's weight, you need to consider, am I a medical professional? Do I have the right or do I have the actual resources to be discussing somebody's weight? Because sometimes we will say that, oh, somebody is getting big, but the whole time they just lost 20 pounds. Sometimes we'll say, oh, someone must be diabetic, the whole time their A1C is where it needs to be. Sometimes we'll talk, someone will be actually overweight, but they're working on it already with their doctor. They already have a plan discussed. They already have a routine and the necessary steps that they need to take. But because it's not your business, of course you don't know this, and yet you still find it your goal or find it your responsibility to go and discuss somebody's weight with them. That is something that we don't need to be doing, and it can have a lasting effect. As I said, things like this can lead to depression, they can lead to eating disorders, they can lead to self-harm and wanting to kill yourself. And we know once you get into that mind frame of isolation and wanting to kill yourself, the devil is going to try whatever he can to take you from there and to destroy you. And we're not realizing as a community, even when we're trying to be nice, even when we think we're not causing harm, you may be leading the next youth, you may be leading the next older person, you might be leading a new member to go into the opposite direction because this is how you approach them or this is how you discuss certain things that don't need to be discussed. And then the last trauma that was discussed is spare the rod and spoil the child. So this saying comes from multiple places in the Bible, but specifically I'm going to take it from Proverbs 29:15. And the whole verse is, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. And that is all to say that it's meant to say that it's necessary that you correct your children. It's necessary that you correct each other because you don't want them to learn bad ways and go about life or go about situations incorrectly. But as a culture and as a community, we've taken it a little too far. We've taken sparing the rod too far. There's times where we will insult each other. There are times where we will beat each other or beat our children in scenarios that is not necessary. Sometimes we take it too harshly or we take it too far.
Now I'm tired. I'm gonna go to sleep. What? When I was so age, I used to wake up in the morning 4 a.m. to go and wash my mother and father clothes, go and dry them, go and hang them. I used to make my father breakfast, then go and walk 25 miles to school barefooted, no shoes, no sandals, no sneakers, no slippers. I would go to school, do my classwork, be the top of the class, number one. Nobody was beating me. Then I come back 20 miles back home, go and do all the housework, clean the whole place, and then eat dinner, and then get 30 minutes of sleep every day. You are complaining you are tired. What tired? Why did God have to give me African parents? Like, why couldn't he just make me like a turtle or something? Like, why?
I use this example, even though it's meant to be a funny example and it's lighthearted, I use this example as for our community and as parents, we tend to belittle the experiences of others. We feel like, especially if we were born in Ghana specifically, we feel like whatever we went through in Ghana, how you were raised here can't compare. And we forget that just because you went through your own struggles, no one is saying that you haven't had it hard. No one is saying that you didn't have to be tough, but there's also different struggles that are met here, whether it's with your children, whether it's with people that you work with or other community members. There are different struggles that different age groups can experience. And a lot of the time in our culture, we try to belittle or we accidentally belittle what someone else is going through. As in the example, the son was saying that he was tired and he was going to rest. And his father saying, how could you be tired? And I can understand from a parent standpoint, if you went to work and then you came home to cook and you cleaned and you've been working or maybe 6 days a week for your family, you feel like you know what tired is. And then for you to be doing this all for your child and then your child says they're tired, for you it's as if you don't feel appreciated and you're saying, how could you be tired? You don't do the same things that I do. But the thing is, someone can still be tired and have a whole different experience than you, especially when it comes to children. in the school environment alone, there's a lot of things that can be going on with your child that can cause them to be tired, that can cause them to have stress, that can cause them to have issues. And if you don't allow there to be an environment for your child to speak to you, like in this moment when the child was saying they were tired, that could have been an opportunity for the father to say, what's going on? Do you want to discuss it? Is there anything that I can help with? But instead, it turned into a comparison, a competition. And the other issues that we tend to have in our culture is that if there was an Olympics for insults, Ghana would win gold every time. Maybe Ghana might win silver, but for the most part, if there was Olympics for insults, Ghana would win gold every time. Because for whatever reason, it's as if we want to spice up the conversation some more with the extra flair. Whatever we're discussing, if it's not the tone that's aggressive, it's the words that we're using.
You come sit here, baby. What for them, Papa? I'm what's that here? Dismiss.
Will make uncomfortable comments if someone will ask you a question or your child might ask you a question and instead of just answering it straightforward, you insult them. You would be teaching, say someone came to learn your special watch it. The way that you make your watch it is not like anybody else's. They came to learn it and they made a mistake, and instead of saying, oh no, this is how you actually do it, or this is how long you're supposed to boil the beans, instead, you start laughing at them and you insult them and say, who taught you? Do you have a brain in your head? Like, why aren't you paying attention? There's a lot of ways that we communicate with each other, with our children, with our parents, that is not necessary and is not conducive to helping us to communicate with each other. There's sometimes that we're not considerate about what the words that we say, because sometimes we feel like it's not as bad or it's not as harmful and how we explain something. Whole time you could create a whole nother scenario for the person that is receiving your message. And it's important to be considerate about the things that we say and how we explain things. Because again, going back to if you spoil the rod, you spoil the child. A lot of the times as parents, especially when we're disciplining our children or when we're in certain scenarios, we won't explain to the children why something is happening. We might answer them with, because I said so, or because that's what I said, because I'm the parent, because you're supposed to listen to me. We won't explain what is going on, and that helps to create an environment of resentment. A great example that I'll use, and it's perfect that the person is on here tonight. The one time at youth camp, my mom didn't go this year, so I was staying with my big cousin, and her name is Mrs. Adjoa Larby, but at the time her name was Adjoa Ajimai. And one night after the evening devotion, my friend Chanel and we went to somebody else's room, and we were just hanging out, and we were laughing, and we were having a good time. I want to say maybe it was an hour or 2 hours that we spent in the room. And then we said, okay, it's time to go to bed. Let's go to our rooms. So I hugged her. Chanel went to her room. I went to my room. The minute I walked into my room, she slapped me, and I was so shocked. And of course, I was hurt. So I was crying, and I didn't understand, like, why did you slap me? What is going on? Da, 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 da. The whole reasoning for her slapping me was because when I left after evening service and I went to the person's room, I didn't tell anybody where I was going. And she technically at the time was my guardian. So I didn't tell my guardian where I was going. My dad was on campus. I didn't tell my dad where I was going. I didn't tell anybody where I was going except for the person that I was with. So for that hour or 2 hours that I was gone, to everybody else, I went missing. And even though as a child I didn't understand what's the problem. We're at youth camp. There's other people around. Everyone that's around are other campers. If I'm safe anywhere is here. This is where I'll be the most safe. So I was confused. So I went to sleep upset. I was crying, and I was so mad. I just went to sleep. So in the morning, she explained to me everything that I just said. She explained that you didn't tell anybody where you were going. We didn't know what had happened to you. When we were looking for you, we couldn't find you. Whole time you were in somebody else's room. And remember, I said I was with my friend Chanel. Chanel told her big sister where she was going. So her big sister knew exactly where she was, and she made sure to make someone aware. So she explained to me The reason why I slapped you, or the reason why it was a big deal, was because of this. You put yourself in danger, and I didn't know that. So as parents, it's the same thing. You need to explain to your children why they're being disciplined, or why something they did was wrong, or why you don't agree with the decision that they're making. Because sometimes your children work from a logical standpoint. So if you don't give them something logical to work with, they'll be confused, they'll resent you, and sometimes that'll lead to rebellion. So already from that moment, I knew that my big cousin was going to be a great mom, because she took that opportunity to teach me and to help me to understand what was going on. But if she had just slapped me and called it a day and cussed me out, I would have grew up resenting her, like, oh, she's just mean, or oh, she just likes to put hands on people. She just likes to be angry. But the whole time it was because of my safety. And that put back in my brain that if I'm going anywhere, I need to make sure that I communicate everywhere that I'm going. I need to make sure that people are aware of what's going on. Research shows for every negative message we hear about ourselves, it takes many more positive messages to rebuild confidence. That's just one of the reasons why encouragement is so important. And the reason I bring this up again is, as I mentioned, if there was an Olympics for insults, Ghana would win every time, because we don't take into consideration, even if it's a small insult, even if it's something small, we think, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But research has shown that one negative comment, it could take many for that to erase. And even then, after all the positive comments you can get, you will still remember that one negative. So that is all to say that we need to remember how we talk to each other, because the way that we communicate can really have a lasting impression on someone. Our words tend to hold more weight. Well, in certain scenarios, our words hold more weight than our actions. So the way that we speak is very important to the way that we communicate and interact with each other. So instead, I want you to do, again, we'll always take it back to the Bible. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers." So as said in the example of spare the rod, you spare the child, this is now telling us that the communication and the way that you speak should not be negative. It should not be corrupt. It should not be evil. When you're speaking, it should be to help to edify, to help correct someone. It should be to help to minister grace, because at the end of the day, we are all humans and we all make mistakes. So when we communicate with each other and we understand that we're all humans, we're all children of God, and we're all going to make mistakes, we know that we can extend grace to each other. Giving someone grace means to extend forgiveness, acceptance, or blessing to someone who may not deserve it. It can also mean giving someone a chance, time, or the ability to make mistakes without punishment. This goes back to this also goes back to communication, because forgiveness is also a big part of it. There's a lot of times people will do something to us, they will say something to us, and they won't apologize. But at the end of the day, whether they apologize or not, we need to forgive for our own sake. We need to be able to accept what has happened and understand that at the end of the day, no matter how hard it is or how bad it is, God will take vengeance for us. If it's that deep, God will take care of it for us. But we also need to take into consideration, there's a lot of us that will say, oh, I forgive that person, or oh, I don't have a problem with that person. But your body language, especially as Ghanaians, your body language will say otherwise. You will say you forgive somebody, but you don't want to greet them, or if they come around, your face switches up, your face looks sour as if you smelled some garbage. We need to take all this into consideration. Your words are communication, but the way your face and the way your body reacts is also part of communication. So when you're expressing yourself, the things that you need to take into into consideration, is to not embarrass someone that you're speaking to. So if we use the example of wanting to discuss somebody's weight, or feeling like something is going on with them, a lot of the times we will take the opportunity at church in front of everyone to be like, hey, you're gaining weight. Is everything okay? Are you sick? That's not how you go about conversations like that. Whenever there's something that could be sensitive that you want to talk to somebody about, try to pull them aside and have a private conversation. You don't want to embarrass somebody in the process of communicating with them. You also want to take someone's feelings into consideration. There's a lot of times where we can accidentally offend somebody. We know that what we were saying, we didn't mean to offend them. We didn't mean to do anything wrong, but that's the way that they took it. And in a scenario where someone feels offended by you, you have to acknowledge it. You can't just argue with them and say, oh, I didn't offend you. I didn't do that to you. Because even if you didn't feel that way, the person feels offended. So you need to acknowledge, I'm sorry. It wasn't my intention to do this to you, but I recognize that this is how you feel. So you can't tell someone when to heal, what to feel. If they feel this way, you just acknowledge it. I'm not saying don't defend yourself, but you still have to acknowledge the person's side of the story. And then last, we also want to consider the tone and our delivery. The tone in which you say certain things can also help dictate how a conversation will go. For example, if you say, "How can I help you?" and then you also say, "How can I help you?" Even though I used the same words, the tone made the sentence different. The tone gave a different intention in each scenario. It's the same thing as your delivery. Sometimes what we're saying or how we're talking to someone, the subject matter is correct. The subject matter needs to be addressed. Maybe somebody did something wrong, so you do need to go and correct them. It's the way that you deliver that message that is important. We know that there's ways that are harsh and words that you don't need to use. And then we know who we're communicating with. So we need to recognize our tone and the delivery that we share it with. So I have some homework for you. Before you say blank, ask yourself blank. So before you say, when are you getting married? Bisa Jose, why do I want to know? Am I being curious? Do I truly want, am I concerned that the person is having trouble finding someone to date? If it's truly out of concern and it's not because you're curious or you're looking for the next party to attend, you can ask instead, are you dating or are you interested in anyone? Now, if the person responds and they say that they are dating or they're not dating, they're interested in someone or they're not interested, wherever the person leaves the conversation is where you must also leave the conversation. If they don't want to continue, it is not your place to continue the conversation because we have to recognize boundaries. Same thing before you ask, when are you having babies or when are you having children? Be someone who said, will I be financially supporting the child? Now, with this one, I don't have a proper way for you to ask this because I don't think it's a question that should be asked at all. I think it's something that we need to let God do because God knows best and God has his timing. God knows when he will bless a family with a child. And in some scenarios, there might be a family that God doesn't have in the plans to bring children to them. So with this question specifically, I don't think it should be asked at all and it should just be removed from our phrases and our categories altogether. Before you ask, you gained weight, you're too skinny, or before you say it, ask yourself, am I a medical professional? Is the way I'm asking appropriate? Because again, there's sometimes you think someone gained weight and they're actually losing weight. Or sometimes you think someone is unhealthy, but in reality, they are healthy. If it's not coming from a actual place of concern, it shouldn't be the question that you're asking. But if you are concerned and you truly believe that something could be wrong, simply asking them how they've been feeling can help. Because depending on how they answer, it might lead you to figuring out or putting two and two together. They might say, oh, I've been tired. I haven't been sleeping. Oh, I've been nauseous, whatever the case may be. And it might be able to lead you to what, if there is an issue, what the issue is. But otherwise, there really shouldn't be a reason why we're asking someone about their appearance or their weight because everyone owns a mirror. Everyone knows what they look like. Everyone, for the most part, owns a scale. So it is not our place to be concerned about somebody else's weight. And then last but not least, before you say you're stupid, why don't you understand? Ask yourself, why do I need to insult them? If there's no way there's no way to have an interaction while being negative for something positive to come out of it. So if there's a situation where someone isn't understanding and you're becoming frustrated, instead of taking it out on them, you can ask them, what are you having trouble with? Or what can I explain better? That way they'll be able to tell you exactly what the issue is. If they don't understand 2 + 2 = 4, then you take 2 straws, and then there's 2 more straws, and then they count the straws, and you put it in a different perspective for them to understand. But you should be asking on how you can help them to understand better how to elaborate. And before we get to the questions and contributions, the whole reasoning for this is that first, for our survival, we need to be mindful of how we communicate. We can't let our culture and the tradition take priority over religion and God's instructions. The Bible itself tells us that the way that we talk to each other can keep us from heaven. God doesn't like when we speak pridefully. God doesn't like when we insult each other. God doesn't like when we use curse words. God doesn't like when we're abusive. So if we're going to say that we're Christians and we're going to say that heaven is our home, we need to make sure that in our households and in our everyday interactions that we're paying attention to the way that we communicate. And at this time, I will open it up for any questions or contributions. You can ask in Tree, you can ask in English, you can ask in Tringlish, you can write it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. And if you don't have any questions, that is okay too.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Show us. Sir.
You, me say, you di kan me share your my good lecture di or say ajiman, if that is right. Auntie D, di kan me da was pa. Say yes, as you know, na me ni ho nti no ka said doctor. So when your doctor so Yakupon ka ho. Na unim die na enkosro emro doctor crowd yeso. Yamin ka ho because onipa uwa ena na asa adesua de bibia nimde kosoro kakra bi na mepese meka emsa ansa na meba ha no mi wo Ghana no se ye hwa yeti wo TV so se America ha de omunkoda no omutitie oye rough kra ne mame obefre police amawo ye monkoda yenye sei nanso ye no environment na ye wo ya ye tete ye mu no na ye different what can simpi wa ha sakoda bi ya dia ese yetimi bu no me ko school ni twa ye ma enso se ebribi kro bi ko bo ne ma wo Ghana na wo fukọ no so emse emre sesa na ha so ntete ye no so esesa na ni na ni tie wo ma ne se nura me nyonko bi ye osofo a okọ no aba America obo wabeka wa ha ena mbisa nse na ade no won fa ne mma ne na yire mma osi o mentwen na opese ne mma ni nyi wo Ghana kakra na ntete no omunya ena msi yo ekwami so bibia wa advantage na disadvantage na ye na me de omunyi kakra wo Ghana ansa omoba itime ba ha no so ma hu se nsonso ye wo ne kra ne se ye nyina mu no ese ya awofo no yesuru nyame ne adi nyame suro tete ye mofra o Ghana o abrochiro na yankopon no nim de ye maye pacho contribution kakra me de mano no me di de Lieutenant Colonel Chum Ampo for retired me da se.
Amen. Thank you.
Madam, yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think you started by quoting, six and stone may not break your bones, but six and stone may break your bones, but not words. But as you presented it, maybe you reminded us of a common phrase which was used during the Obama first presidential campaign. That was, words have meaning. And as you went on, we saw how you express yourself about how words can make or unmake individuals. But one observation here is that there is a vast difference between our cultural practices in Ghana as against in the US. If you had the time to go through African Writers series, a lot of the books actually focused on our culture and how it influenced so many things, including raising of our kids. Violence to youth and all those things, it's not acceptable anywhere, even in our society. The extent of violence towards our kids and all those things, sometimes those are criticized. But my concern here is relate to how words influence the character and maybe upbringing or the psychological and maybe physical upbringing of these kids. For the longest, my understanding was that in Ghana, people actually appreciated a weight gain rather than being skinny or weight loss. And comments about weight gain tend to be very complimentary, which is not it's not the same in the US. Actually, what you posted about the statistics, it made reference to children in the US. You know, traditionally, when kids were born in Ghana, they tended to put some beads, those tiny beads around their wrists, maybe their ankles and all those things. They were a way of determining how fast the kid will grow. And so by the time he fills the beads, it's taken off and another set, a looser set is put on. And generally they encourage weight. And so most of the time comments about weight gain, I don't know the situation now, but most of the time comments about weight gain was more complimentary, unlike in the US. And so with those differences, I figure maybe those comments, especially in Ghana as against there's a lot of differences based on our cultural understanding. One exception I've always made is about this biblical quotation about spare the rod and spoil the child. I think traditionally we've misinterpreted it, and it's very common for a lot of people to come out with biblical quotations to justify some wrongs and all those things based on their misinterpretation. My understanding is if you go through the Bible and you see how the shepherd used a rod, he never used a rod to beat up the sheep. He rather used it to save them or guide them. And so my understanding had been just advising us to do as much as possible to correct kids when they go wayward and trying to guide them. But beating them with rods and all those things, that doesn't bring in any changes, doesn't put any extra sense into your hand. It was a way of elderly people painting out their anger, and also it showed their their inability to communicate with kids as they grow, and so they just bullied them along. That specific quotation, I don't think that justifies the use of cane and all those things. After all, if we literally think the rod is meant to beat up kids, then why do we use belts and our hands and all those things? It's a way of telling us that we have to take steps to raise the kids in the very corrective way. So that's how we misinterpret a lot of these biblical teachings, and it's not exclusive to the Ghanaian culture. The U.S. they also have a history of this misinterpreting it, and parents painting up their frustration on kids and all. I always say that a lot of times you see parents complaining, especially when their kids have grown and are much bigger than them, and they can't really beat them up. So they'll say, oh, woman, who can't someone but the point is that we never learn to talk to them. We use the rod or the belt and all those things to bully them. And so by the time they're overgrown and we can't beat them, then we complain that they don't listen to us because we haven't inculcated the culture of communicating with them through words and all those things. One thing, coaches, football coaches especially, when they go to training, one exercise they take them through is how to modulate your voice for every situation. Okay, when it's very complimentary, how you the softness of your voice. If you want to do something more aggressively, how you energize in the use of your voice, and so I think these are some of the things you have to learn. The clash of cultures are there, and we have to find a way every effort deliberately to correct ourselves as time goes on. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you for your contribution.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Hi. Doctors, thank you for your information. I think so this is like a much needed conversation. It needs to actually go on in a bigger platform and have everybody hear this conversation. But my question is what I've noticed is some people with those conversations like, oh, the bay now worry or the bay now bow, when is the next kid coming? I've noticed that for most people in the crowd, it's like their way of starting a conversation without even caring.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that conversation in the crowd should not start at all, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't know that person, and I say you don't have that type of relationship with that person, So my question is, in that case, how do you also respond? I said, how do you answer to maybe the auntie or the uncle, who keeps saying something that you're uncomfortable with without disrespecting the person? Because also in our culture, if you did say, auntie, like I'm question of you, and I say, however you say it, it will come out so rude. Meanwhile, you're feeling uncomfortable with that question every time they see you, they ask you the same question. So, do you have a better way of responding to that question so the auntie doesn't keep asking the same question, even though sometimes she doesn't mean it, but for you, you don't want to hear that question all the time.
That's a very, very great question. Thank you for that up. My answer actually can apply to both ways. So my answer can apply to how you respond to someone asking you the question. And I know there's some people that feel like it's a question that certain questions are things that they do want to discuss, but they don't want to offend you. And in both scenarios, I would say to state clearly and as nicely as you can, because tone is important, but state clearly like, oh, if it's an auntie, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable with this discussion topic, and I would like to not discuss it further. And a lot of the times they'll probably come back and say, oh, but I'm not, I'm not saying it to be rude, or I'm not saying it to cause an issue, and you just reiterate and you just say, I understand and I appreciate your concern, but it is not a topic that I'm ready or willing to discuss right now. So after that, if they still don't take it, you can also continue and say, I respectfully, if you bring it up again, like I will not be continuing the conversation with you. Basically to say that there won't be a point where you'll be ready to talk about it. But if there is a point, then maybe you'll reach out to them. But as for them coming to discuss it with you, you're not comfortable with the subject matter and you have no intentions to continue the conversation. Now, unfortunately, in our culture, you can say something as sweet as you can with a smile on your face, with roses in your hand, and someone will still say you offended them or you insulted them. Now, it's going to happen, unfortunately, but at the end of the day, as long as you know that you said it nicely and as long as you know that you were respectful, God knows. However they take it, whether they go gossip about it, whether they say that you were rude, God knows exactly what happened. So you don't have to, it's easier said than done, but you don't have to worry about it too much, I should say, because at the end of the day, God knows what happened and you made your boundaries clear. Because that the reason why it becomes something that people feel insulted about is because there, as a community, we don't recognize boundaries. And as mentioned earlier, there's certain things that people think is their place to talk about. So you setting your boundaries, for some people, it is going to come off as offensive. But as long as there's no attitude, as long as your tone is nice, and as long as you don't curse, simply saying, I'm not comfortable with this conversation is honestly good enough. Whether they take it that way or not, it is good enough and it was respectful.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because that's the brave addition to say I would their brain. Like Auntie Queer said, there was a called bigger platform. So now it be a TB. Ye movie no say na ya sisa ye kasa. Now you mean because ye Ghana for ye kasa no. Into no ya sisa. Now me so me question no me de counter a queer there no say. A better na ye concern Auntie see. Yes, so more moving here. You person who what's going on. How do we ask our questions? When we say, if you should know, if you have the right to know, you won't ask. And know what you are but if you must be a concern, you person who know the question. No be a dear foot to mamu. How do we ask our questions, sir? More or young people no get offended with us.
Thank you. There's a few ways that you can do that. And one of the most important one, if it's going to be direct, is by having or creating a relationship with that person. So let's say if it's a youth member that you want to talk to, if you don't have a relationship or a friendship with them, there won't be a point that you come to them that they won't be suspicious. So you need to create a genuine relationship with the person that you're concerned about. And sometimes that person will be offstandish and it may not be easy. So that's one route, is to become friends or develop a relationship. That way, when you are ready to discuss these things with them, they will know that you're coming from a genuine standpoint. They'll know that you're not coming from a place of gossip or anything like that. But another route that you can take as well is, instead of going directly to them, maybe if this is a youth member that we're talking about, you maybe go to mom or you go to dad and say, oh, this is something that I noticed, like, is everything okay? Or this is the situation at hand. Now, again, usually, at least I'll use me for example. Anything that happens with me that I don't want my parents to tell people, I will flat say, this doesn't leave the house, don't tell anybody. So even if our auntie were to go and ask my mom or my dad what is going on with Dakas, they will know this is something that she doesn't want to talk about. So at that point, again, even if you're concerned, if the person that you're talking to doesn't want to talk about it, or if their parent that you want to talk to doesn't want to talk about it, you can't force it. Because if the as the message said, if you had the right to ask, you would already know. It might not be the time yet for you to know. Maybe you are someone that has the right to know, but it might not be the time. So if you don't have the one, it really starts with having a relationship. If you don't have a relationship with this person outside of hi, bye, how are you doing, did you eat, then there's certain conversation that cannot happen. So first, develop a friendship so that the conversation can be easy and they know that you're being genuine. And then another thing is to try to use someone that you have in common, again, but through genuine conversation. But at the end of it, no matter which way, if the person does not want to talk about it, you cannot force them.
That's the brain. I mean, constitution.
Sure you or any other questions and as a contribution side.
You the question for the ladies, when it comes to the Jewish community, they have their culture and they actually manage to mix it up with the American culture and all those things. Some of these issues which are common with our culture, which might be considered interference and all those things. The Jews also have those structures. They have a way of weaving it through the system. And I know that these questions that may be forbidden under the American culture, the Jews have in their culture these, but they've developed a system in such a way that they are always able to maneuver it through the current system in the US. How do we actually, the good aspects of our culture, incorporate it with the American system so that it might not appear to be very interfering or resentful to the kids when these issues go up? Because basically, like the Jews, we consider ourselves as you remember what Hillary Clinton wrote about raising. It takes a village to raise a child. It's a purely Ghanaian concept. She learned it in due course because of her interaction with a Ghanaian lady who actually helped raise her kid. And so there are certain aspects of our culture which are very valuable, just as the Jews have their valuable aspects of their culture, but they've been able to maintain it in spite of what they face in the American culture. How do we inculcate these things into our practices in America? Because there are very good aspects of our culture in that manner.
You are very right. And I believe that part of the issue when it comes to our culture and trying to bring the good things of our culture here, for example, as you said, it takes a village, which is very important and very true. It does take a village to raise a child. It's not only mom and dad that can do it by themselves. And the issue with bringing that here is that there's a lot of us in our community that we let pride, jealousy, and just gossip get in the way. And I'm not saying that we're the only culture or we're the only community that experiences the things that I mentioned, but the issue specifically with us is to be able to be a village and raise a child, we should be all on the same page and we should all be willing to see that child grow. But there's a lot of us that we might have a child in the same age group, or maybe we ourselves are in the same age group as their parents. And it turns into a competition of, oh, well, look, this child is doing this over there. Why isn't my child doing it? Or like, oh, you think you're better than me because you have this money or you have these resources or whatever. In our culture, there's a lot of times where when we look at somebody doing what they can afford or doing what they can do, we're judging them. We're judging them from their class. We're judging them from what they wear. We're judging them from how they speak. And it's crazy to say because we're all Christians at the end of the day and we all know that this isn't what we're supposed to be doing. But that is one of the big things that hinders us as a community here in America is that we're not a unit. We're not actually a community. There's more competition than community that we have here. There's more I'm better than you or I can do this better than you than we have. Like, especially when it comes to the church, there will be people that are arguing for positions in the church, whether it's being the closest to the pastor, being the choir director, being the head cook, being the head deaconess. We don't do a lot of us don't do or serve God for the purpose of serving God. We don't do or serve our community for the purpose of serving our community. It seems for us, a lot of it is about accolades and acknowledgement and being able to say, yeah, I'm the first elder. So that is honestly what hinders us from having a community here. There are semblings of it, and you can see it, especially within certain family groups. Like, take, if I say the Osai Ajimai family, maybe you can see within this family, oh, they're a community by themselves. But that's what we do. It's like we create little pockets of community instead of coming all together. And a lot of it has to do with pride, a lot of it has to do with jealousy, and a lot of it has to do with comparison and wanting to feel better than the other. So if there's a way that as a community, as a religion, as a culture, if we can stop trying to be in competition with each other, if we can stop trying to be God's favorite, then we be able to really do big things here. Because there's so many of us. Take when we go to youth camp or camp meeting and we're all gathered together. If we were all able to buy land and be on the land, we would have our own community, our own schools. The community would flourish. The issue is that there's going to be the people that want to be this just because they want the title. And that's what's hindering us from growing together or growing and creating a village. I hope that helped answer your question.
It largely answers the question. But, you know, sometimes I get the impression that this competitive nature and all those things, it's actually some sort of foreign influence in our culture. Our culture is based in such a way that there was supposed to be an even playing ground. Ghana especially, if you go through our history, when it even comes to land possession and all those things, it never used to be the same way as practiced in the US. It was more of a community property, given entrusted to the leader or the chief and all those things, and that's how we were able to get our independence first from the British and all, because they couldn't enforce that sort of capitalistic values in our land property, property owning. And so a lot of these so-called competition and all those things, they are a later infusion into our culture based on our exposure to other countries. And so with that, I think if you try to go to the basics and the good things about our culture, if we bring it around and use it in moving along with the training of our kids, I understand that certain aspects like using words to train our kids, talking to them, and even allowing them leverage in talking back to us or explaining themselves to. If you're able to do it from their infancy and bring it up, things will change. Traditionally, it has been children are seen, not heard. But if we find a way of hearing them and also seeing them, it will be a different calculation. But I strongly believe that the very good aspects of our culture are very important in bringing up the kids, because the Jews have done it. You know, when it comes to the Jewish community, one aspect is about the use of uncles and aunties. A lot of things you can't even tell your parents. You can tell your uncles or aunties. A lot of things, inquiries your parents want to make about certain things, they can go through your aunties or your auntie, your uncle. They have the use of the rabbis and all those things, helping the community raise their kids and develop them the way as to maintain a healthy structure in their communities. I think if we go ahead and use all these facilities and all those, and it will be very good for us. Rather unfortunately, over the years, these African writers series books and all those, and people don't access them. But if we can go back to them, some of those which dwelt on our culture and all those, and it might give us a very good blueprint to start with. We can't lose our culture because there are certain bad aspects of it, or we appreciate somebody's culture more than ours. My opinion is that if we find a way of blending ours with the qualities, that will allow us to maintain our culture, that's great. In fact, when we come to, we travel, we go to the US, the only thing we express about our culture is maybe our food and our clothing and all those things. Sometimes we forget to show up the sort of practices which actually help in raising kids. There are certain aspects of it which I talked about, the bullying and all those, the kids and all those we can deal with, or we can do away with. But there are very good aspects of our this in the community building and everything, which will be very helpful in the foreign. The Jews never lost their culture even when they were in the foreign land, and that's one thing we can learn from them and try and go about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That questions and contributions by Ninase time no ekopa anti the ene program no ebisi ha say.
That's what I say be a pageant, yeah.
Obi that's a question.
If I tell me pajamas, about time no quinty, a base Saturday obey the same program work first Ghana and to me bisa or homedas.
Yes, that's it. If I try me take this opportunity at the Inya Bado Kasasepa for this presentation. Now, why am I now the topic of the conversation? No, it's a really prevalent thing in a Ghanaian community. I think as a community, we're getting better at it because these conversations are happening a lot more often, and people are getting a lot more mindful about how they speak and what not to say and how to say certain things. And I hope we're still taking notes, and we're also still going to be working on our conversation skills and being mindful about people's situations. Questions and contributions about